Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Untold Tales from this side of nowhere. You already know this, but I'm your host, Connor Jones, and I'm bringing you another story live from the middle of nowhere, or about as close as you can get, which is Poverty Flats, Wyoming. I am once again joined by a guest whom I am super excited to introduce, but first, let me tell you a little bit about this week's sponsors. This week we are sponsored by Basins Market, located in Basin, Wyoming. As you know, Basins Market is your destination for groceries, fresh produce, and the best meat department in the Bighorn Basin. Come on in and sample their wide selection of products Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Sundays from noon to 6 p.m. You also know that we're sponsored by the Wyoming Welcome Program. The folks at the Wyoming Welcome Program are excited about their service, which is called Table Talk. They place brochures on restaurant tables in Cody and Powell that are filled with fun facts about Wyoming, jokes, and the month's holidays. In addition to this information, they include advertisements from local businesses. So, if you're interested in getting your name out there, please send Wyoming Welcome an email. Their service is affordable and effective. You can reach them at Haley J, that's HALEYJ, at wyomingwelcome.com. And now, the podcast. Well, at long last, I'm pleased to introduce my guest for this week's episode, my younger brother, Camden. Hey, Camden.
Hey, how's it going?
Great, I'm here with you. We're in podcast land, and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
share a good story.
Alrighty.
So, Camden has some exciting news for everybody.
Yes, well, currently I am serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I just started this past week, and I'm excited to be able to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with the folks down in San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah, going to Texas. I'm very proud of Camden, and it is his P day. He's doing some at-home MTC. And when do you leave for Provo, man?
I leave next week, so it'll be on October 11th.
Or the 10th?
The
Isn't
10th
that?
is when I leave, and then I report on the 11th, so.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Well, yeah, I guess maybe I should call you Elder while we're talking, but just for the sake of avoiding confusion, I guess we'll go with Camden for now.
Okay, that works.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm getting Camden in here one last time to talk about one of our mutual interests, which is running. Now, before you run screaming from your phone or wherever you're listening to this, don't worry. We're not. No, I can't speak for Camden, but I'm not really what you'd call a hardcore runner. But we have some experience with running in Wyoming.
I'm not sure what your definition of a hardcore runner is, but I think you're probably considered there in my definition.
Oh, I don't, and I don't know if that's a compliment or if you're trying to say I'm crazy. But
We'll let the listeners figure that one out.
yeah. So this week's story is entitled "Running in Wyoming." Ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, whenever you want to jump in, just let me know.
Okay.
I've heard it said that Wyoming is the only place where you can wear a parka and sunscreen in the same day. And though I can't support the first part of this statement, I can certainly attest to the second. I've been to many track meets in which the mornings started out with some cold rain, perhaps even some frost and snow, and ended with 65-degree weather and sunshine. We've all heard, if you don't like the weather in Wyoming, just wait 5 minutes and it will change. One thing that never seems to change, however, is how hard it is to be a runner in Wyoming. Now, for those who know me and my family, it may come as a surprise that I am a runner. Just the other day at work, I had a conversation with a fellow school teacher about my running problem. He is tall and lanky, well over 6 foot, with a build that would attract a cross country coach like a black bear to a bee tree. "So you're a runner, huh?" he asked me, quickly taking in my decidedly unathletic 5 feet and change. Speaking of which, I am the shortest Jones in the family, so yeah.
Yes, yep, yeah. Coming from the tallest Jones in the family.
Yeah, Camden he's better suited. You're over 6 foot, right?
I believe I'm like maybe just under or right on the nose.
Okay.
Depends if
Yeah.
I'm wearing shoes, I guess.
Not me. Let's see. "Yup," I replied, bouncing a little on the balls of my feet as I watched some sixth graders playing ultimate frisbee. "Hum," he grunted, a look of disbelief on his face. "Yeah, I've run a marathon and a couple halves," I said, starting to wish I hadn't brought up the subject. "You any good at running?" he asked. A grin split my face. "I do all right, I guess." He nodded and tried to hide a smile. "So, did you start as a kid? How long have you been a runner?" "Well," I said, the mists of time suddenly gathering around us, "it all started the summer leading up to my 7th grade year." At age 11, when I entered 6th grade, I was definitely on the fluffy side of the body mass index. Maybe even teetering on the edge, where you start getting fed carrot sticks like a rabbit, and people start bringing up terms like pre-diabetes and potential candidate for heart disease. Not that I wasn't a fairly active kid, I just didn't particularly like activities that required more than a brisk walk or the occasional light jog. I was short, pretty round, and as flexible as a fence post. All these factors combined to make my introduction to organized sports in the fall of 6th grade a pretty painful experience. On the football field, I was a tackling dummy for the other kids. On the basketball court, I was a slow moving obstacle for the kids who actually got to touch the ball. You can forget about track. The only redeeming quality that sport could offer was the fact that it ended. Needless to say, by the time summer rolled around, I was determined not to have another year like the one I had just been through. True, playing 3 sports had helped me improve my physical condition, but it had still done little to make me enjoy running any more than I had before. That's when Mom made a suggestion that changed everything. It was a day in late June, and baseball season had ended, so when my chores were finished, I was doing what every boy does during the summer. That is, I was looking for something to do. Mom could read the signs easily. I had a pocket knife in my hand, and I was listlessly flipping it open and closed, sitting on the front porch. Mom was working in one of her flower beds. Ever since we had finished building our house, she had dedicated herself to beautifying our yard, and she was always planting, pruning, and pulling at the plants that grew around the house. "Al, go do something!" She finally burst out from where she was kneeling on the grass. "You're going to drive me crazy if you keep playing with that knife." Have you ever had that experience before?
Similar, yes. Especially, I don't know. That's a very similar experience to many I've had with mom.
"Okay," I said. "I just don't know what I want to do." "I have an idea," she said. "Why don't you run down to the mailbox and back?" Run? Just for the heck of it? I didn't think the idea had ever crossed my mind before. If it had done so at a pretty quick pace, being sure not to draw undue attention to itself for fear of getting tarred and feathered, then run out of town. though not at too quick of a pace. Now it was front and center, jogging in place at the front of my mind. Me? Run? I asked. Sure, Mom said. I need you to go get the mail. But Mom, that's like a mile, I blurted out. And I wasn't exaggerating either. Our house sat at the top of a sandhill, about 6/10 of a mile from the county road where our mailbox was posted. You couldn't even begin to see the mailbox from the house.
I feel like there's something that needs to be mentioned here is the fact that there is, I mean, usually with the lanes around here, you get like a one cattle guard, but our lane is so long that it requires three cattle guards.
Yeah, that is true.
So not
Oh
only
my
were you, uh, we'll say a roundish kid at the time, but you also had to cross several cattle guards to do so.
Yeah, that'd be 6 cattle guards in total, down and back.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh man, cattle guards. I know, Mom replied. It will keep you busy for a few minutes and get you out of my hair. Okay, I groaned. What happened next only makes sense in the head of a 12-year-old boy who fancies himself a mountain man and not an athlete. At that point in life, I always wore a pair of carpenter jeans and some work boots. And just to complete the look, I carried a pair of leather work gloves and wore a wide brim hat. Growing up on the ranch, I considered shorts to be the quickest way to get either bitten by a rattlesnake or shredded by any of the assorted threats to bare skin one was likely to encounter in that rugged environment. So it was that I started running towards the mailbox that June day in a pair of work boots and carpenter jeans. I wore the wide brimmed hat on my head and the leather gloves on my hands. Of course, I use the term run loosely. By the time I made it the 150 yards to the first cattle guard, I was already gasping for air. I walked most of the way to the mailbox, and then most of the way back. By the time I returned to the house, I was sweaty, my gloves were sweaty, and the mail was soaked too. To Mom's credit, she continued to encourage me, and so it became a daily endeavor. That first week, I walked perhaps 80% of the time and ran the other 20. Over time, my runs would grow in length and my walking spells would shorten. I'll never forget the first time I made it all the way to the mailbox without stopping to walk once. It was one of the most triumphant moments of my life up to that point, and it fanned a little spark I never knew I had burning within me.
I must interject here. Sounds like your introduction to running is a little rougher than mine.
How did you
Um,
start?
so a buddy of mine had done it in middle school, and we were coming on our freshman year of high school, and it was in that summer he told me, if you do cross country, I'll do it too. Now, I don't think he expected me to take him up on that offer, because to his surprise and probably sadness, um, I showed up to practice the first day with him and ended up running a few miles, the longest I'd ever run. And I felt so good afterwards. I was surprised with how much I was able to run. Um, and that's how I figured out that I had that spark in me for running. It sounds
Didn't
like it
uh
was.
didn't that friend end up like getting injured and didn't finish the season?
So we made it to our first meet, which was up in Billings, which is different than all our other meets. It's the only one we do out of state. But yeah, the week following that, the weekend, he was jumping a ditch and pulled his Achilles tendon. And I never saw him again at practice or anything like that.
No.
He milked it as a good excuse to not even show up to practice.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, definitely, yeah, the runner's spark is not something you would expect to find in a Jones. because, you see, while Joneses can be counted on to work their guts out on any given day, we have never been runners. My dad had been an accomplished athlete in high school, but distance running had never been his thing. Both my grandfathers preferred to cover long distances in a seated position, either in a car or on a horse. Before that, my ancestors had only run when they were being chased by something carnivorous. What I'm driving at here is the idea that I was perhaps the first runner in the Jones family. Running was decidedly not in my genes, evidenced by the fact that I started my career as a runner while wearing a pair of jeans. It
I
should
didn't
come as. I'll go for it.
I didn't quite start my career the same way, but I did start it in a pair of old basketball shoes.
Oh, not actual running shoes.
Yes, because I had decided to do it so close to it that we didn't have time to go and get running shoes for me.
Oh, man. It should come as no surprise that whenever I happened to pass someone while I was running, they always offered me a ride. I cut quite the figure jogging the dirt roads of Poverty Flats in work clothes, but I didn't quit. While I opted to play football in the fall rather than run cross country, and no one could persuade me to run in circles on the track like a hamster, I continued to dabble in running. I would crank out a few miles here and there on weekends, and during the summer you could count on me to run 3 or 4 times a week. It just felt good to get out in the fresh air and open my lungs. It wasn't until my senior year of high school when Senor Johnson, who coached track at the high school, got a hold of me.
Let's say that's the same time he got a hold of me too.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that. Say, Al, he began one day in late February, I noticed you didn't play basketball this year. Yeah, I said. Dad had a project he needed help with, so me and Fred decided we would sit this season out. Senor Johnson looked puzzled. Haven't you and Fred been sitting every season out? Well, this year we decided we would do it without actually sitting on the bench in uniforms with the team. That way we didn't have to go to practice too, I said. Oh, I see, Senor Johnson nodded. Well, I think you would do great in track this year. Wouldn't it be nice to participate in one last sport before you graduate? Now, when Senor Johnson got you to do track your senior year, uh, did he even ask, or how'd that work?
Well, he asked me a few times, and I never gave him a sure answer. I'm like, I considered it, but I was like leaning on the side of not doing it. And then one day he comes up to me and, well, for meets, you usually had to have a certain amount of practices to be able to participate in the first meet. Well, since I had done basketball, I didn't have to have that number of practices. And so just before that meet, he comes up to me and told me he signed me up for the mile, the 2 mile, and then an 800 in one of the relays. So the night before the meet, um, I went for a bit of a run at home. I didn't have my stuff to practice at school. So I showed up to the next day for that track meet.
And that's how he got you, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, Senor Johnson. Yeah, so yeah, he told me, wouldn't it be nice to participate in one last sport before you graduate? Is that what they're calling it these days? I mused. Everyone knew track was a torturous experience, unless you were good looking, in which case you made up for all the running by socializing with the other good looking people at the meets. Being neither athletic nor good looking myself, running track did not sound that appealing. In fact, I was pretty sure I would rather spend hours wasting energy on a never ending task. You could spend a few hours a week building up strength and getting faster, Senior Johnson said. Just think, running is a sport you can continue long after high school, and track will be the perfect place to get you started. Didn't you run in middle school? Senior Johnson continued. Yeah, I did, I admitted. I was terrible. Well, it can't hurt to try again, Senior Johnson said reassuringly. Admittedly, the thought of running in circles on the track made my stomach twist in knots, like a length of fishing line in the hands of a 5-year-old. I enjoyed running out in the open, on a dirt road or across sagebrush-studded sandhills, not on an asphalt track. Still, a little bit of the inexorable pull of FOMO, or fear of missing out, started tugging at me, and before I knew it, I was jogging warm-up laps at track practice with the rest of the tracksters. I decided not to wear my carpenter jeans. That track season, I avoided spending time watching the good-looking kids socializing by running every long-distance race I could register for. At every track meet, I ran the 2 mile, the mile, the 4x800 relay, and the 4x400 relay. In spite of my best efforts, I only placed once, in a race with 3 people. But still, I placed. Unable to qualify for the mile at the state meet, I ran the 2 mile. In my very last race of my high school career, the 4x400, I ran the 400 meters in just under 1 minute, a time that failed to raise many eyebrows, but represented every ounce of willpower and effort I could muster. Overall, that track season was a success in my book. I guess my running habit must have rubbed off a bit on my younger brother Caldwell, because when he got into high school, he started running too. That being said, Senior Johnson's persuasive powers may have had more of an influence on Caldwell than I did, which you already mentioned. Caldwell made a good showing for the Jones clan, running all 4 years of his high school career, and he learned firsthand the woes of running in Wyoming.
Oh, did I? I have some pictures of days that we were running, and that would have probably made anyone in a warmer state think that we must have been some crazy Eskimos.
Yeah. Oh man, I remember being in Rexburg at BYU, Idaho, and I was gonna meet another friend from Burlington to go on a run, and it was snowing, and it was about 14 degrees, and this kid came up and he's like, "What on earth are you doing?" And I said, "I'm gonna go for a run." And he's like, "Isn't the weather too bad for running?" And I just told him, "Man, if you want to know what cold is, you need to go to Wyoming." And yeah,
Yes,
I went and ran 5 or 6 miles that day. So
yeah. It's funny. Some of my best runs have been when it's the coldest. I don't know. For me, it's the colder it is, the better I do, I guess. Maybe
yeah,
it's just that my body wants me to get out of there, so it's pushing me harder. But
yeah, that's probably it.
yeah, maybe my body's a little smarter than my mind.
Yeah. Cross country begins in mid-August when temperatures in Wyoming can post scorching highs of up to 100 degrees, and ends in October when it is not uncommon for runners to leave tracks in the snow. I remember attending Caldwell's first ever cross country meet in Billings, Montana. "How are you feeling?" I asked Caldwell, glancing over at him. The day was plenty warm, and a spot of sweat already darkened the back of his uniform after the jog he had taken to warm up. "You gonna read your part?"
Sure. I'm good.
He nodded, eyeing the other runners like a rabbit watching a pack of coyotes. "Just remember to control your breathing, and don't take off too fast," I reminded him. "Set a pace you can maintain." Caldwell nodded, his mouth set in a hard line.
It's just like practice.
When all the runners found their marks on the starting line, my wife Lily and I stood watching from the edge of the course. "He'll do great," I muttered to Lily. "Of course he will," she replied. The gun fired and the runners took off. Caldwell found a comfortable position near the middle of the pack and settled in. Lily and I jogged to different spots along the course, and each time he passed us, we shouted encouragement. "Go, Caldwell! You got this!" Caldwell responded with some gasping. His face was red, and sweat poured down his brow. I was reminded how much fun running is as a sport. When Caldwell crossed the finish line, we were right there cheering him on. He wasn't at the front of the pack, but he was a long way from the back, too. "I'm proud of you, bro," I said, giving him a slap on his sweaty back. Caldwell, for his part, replied by losing his lunch on the grass.
I remember at this meet, like afterwards, I was starting to feel nauseous there. And so I was just like trying to find a spot so I didn't end up losing my lunch on someone.
Yeah. "Oh, heads up," I grunted, stepping back. "Don't walk there," I said to the people behind us. They gave us a wide berth, as well as looks of disgust.
That was quite the race.
Caldwell gasped.
I thought I did all right for my first one, though.
"You did awesome," I smiled. As Caldwell and his team got back on the bus, Lily and I waved. I grinned at Caldwell's retreating form. "I'm glad I'm not the only Jones who likes to run," I said to Lily. She gave me a hug and grinned. "You think he likes to run?" she asked. "Well, does anyone really like it?" I replied with a chuckle. There you go. Running in Wyoming.
Must say, with that meet, I remember that just before the finish line, it has this big long stretch. And I remember at that point, I started to pick up pace. When I got to like, they had like flags going out a good ways from there. And there's some guys, this stretch was like a quarter mile, and there's some guys who passed me just at the beginning of it. I can't remember which year it was, but I ended up going and picking up my pace, and by the end, I felt like I was flying. Like I was just, you see the people flying past, and you feel like your feet are floating off the ground. And I remember slipping between these two runners about 5 or 10 feet from the finish line, and passing, like sliding. I had to turn myself sideways to slide between the two, and then crossing the finish line. And I don't know, it's just, for me, usually the best parts of the race are the last ones, where you're given the rest of what you got, and it just, everything seems to fade away and away, and your legs are just turning.
In all his pain and
Well, and then you cross the finish line, and I guess if it's in my case, you throw up. But
well, Camden's claim to fame is that he is the only Jones to ever be the deciding factor in a state championship for a sport.
I am. I'm also I was the first person to get a cross country state title for Burlington, because at the time we ran for another school, and so we kind of shared a cross country team, and it was crazy. Like all my other years, I had ran alone, but that year we had a bunch of Burlington kids come out of nowhere. Don't know where they'd been all the other years, but they went and ran with us, and we ended up taking the state title. I was our tiebreaker that got us it, and I was the first person to get us a cross country state title, and I was the first person to get my coach, who'd been coaching for 32 years, a boys state title.
That's awesome.
Then, of course, without me, all those boys go and get a second state title the following year.
Yeah, but you are the tipping, you tip
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
so.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, I hope that you continue running, keep up the tradition, it kept me sane when I was a missionary. So I would say
Yeah,
running's a good way to keep your mental health and your physical health good while you're
yeah,
running.
definitely your physical health and the physical state of your clothes from when
Yeah,
regarding dogs. But
yeah. I'm so glad I could have you on. You'll make a fantastic missionary.
thank
And
you.
and shout out to Senor Johnson out there. You know who you are. I'm gonna
Yes, he
have to do an
does.
entire story with, just about Senor Johnson
There
and that
is,
first marathon. So it's coming. You're gonna have to be a guest on the podcast. So
yes, there's plenty of stories there with him.
yeah. Oh man.
Well, thanks for having me on this
Yeah.
podcast.
Thanks so much, and Godspeed, brother.
Thank you.
We'll be following you in your next couple years in San Antonio. So
Thank you.
this has been another episode of Untold Tales from this side of nowhere. As always, you can reach us by sending me an email to untoldtalesthepodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and please be sure to like and review our podcast on the platform where you listen. Share it with your friends, and just make it easier for people to find us. And once again, this has been another episode of Untold Tales from this side of nowhere, where we work twice as hard for half as much and still find time for the important things, like fishing.
Bike fishing.
We'll see you next time, folks.